Amen. You may be seated. Aloha, my name is Scott. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm glad you are with us today. We're in the third week in our series titled, And Then There Were Two, which is we're taking a few weeks to talk about marriage. Now, we're talking about marriage because we really care about the marriages in this church. We care about your marriage. Because we believe, ultimately, God cares about your marriage far more even than we do, because He is the one who ultimately created it. Now, I feel compelled just to give this reminder at the outset that I am not up here because I have somehow attained all this. I have reached marital nirvana. I have figured it all out. I know what to do. I am the perfect husband with the perfect marriage. None of that is true. I am mostly just thankful that my wife doesn't go, ha! Every time I make a point about marriage, because believe me, she would be justified if she chose to do so. But I'm learning alongside with you, especially this week. This week, I felt particularly challenged in preparing this message for this morning. It just showed me how much room I still have to grow as a husband. So we've been focusing this study on what God says about marriage in Ephesians chapter 5. And so far, we've learned that God's vision for marriage is that it would be a lifelong union between one man and one woman. And that in some mysterious way, marriage has always pointed us to Christ, to the gospel. Even before He came, Paul says it's this mystery that man and woman always coming together in marriage represented the church, the bride, us, coming together with Christ, the Son of God and the people of God, uniting into one. Now, this week, I kind of want to put a little bit more flesh on what it looks like for husbands and wives to fulfill their God-given roles in marriage. All right? How do we lead and follow like Jesus? That's what we talked about last week, is that men and women are different. We've been given different roles by God in the marriage. Men are called to lead, women are called to follow, but what does that look like? All right, it's okay to talk about that in theory, but practically, how are husbands and wives supposed to interact? What does that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-long basis? How do we ensure that our thoughts, our attitudes, our actions toward one another are Christ-like? How can we help our spouse flourish? What is it we can do that would lead to us having the marriage that we want to have and that God wants us to have? So for that, we're going to return once more to Ephesians chapter 5. Now, if you missed last week's sermon, I'd encourage you, maybe you can check it on YouTube or on our website, intochurch.com. You can go back and listen to it. We walked through the whole passage of Ephesians 5:22 to 33. There, Paul, his main point is connecting that husbands and wives fulfill the roles of Christ and the church. His main thought was that husbands should lead and wives should submit, but both of them need to do it like Jesus. This will lead to mutual flourishing. But if you look closely at this whole paragraph, his final sentence on the topic of marriage is in verse 33. That's our key verse for this morning, where in verse 33, Paul changes the wording and he changes the focus of what he's talking about slightly. Ephesians 5:33 says, "Each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband." Now, he started off, pretty much the whole thing, he's been talking about the roles, right? The role of leadership and the role of following. So he starts with the what. Men should lead, wives should submit. Then he says why. Because you both imitate Christ when you do this. And now, in this final sentence, he actually switches to how. It's really subtle. If you could miss it. He's talking no longer about the role, no longer about the why, but here he says how. This is the manner in which you should fill the role that God has given you as a spouse. How should husbands lead? How should wives submit? Husbands must lead with love. Wives submit with respect. There's two commands here. Husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. Now, notice that none of these commands come with a qualifier. It doesn't say, husbands, love your wives when they are lovely. Nor does it say, wives, respect your husbands when they are respectable. There are no conditions on either of these statements. Love and respect should be given by husbands and wives no matter what, right? These statements are unconditional. Unconditional love should be given by the husband to the wife. That's kind of a concept we kind of understand in our society. We talk about unconditional love. We go, yeah, of course love should be unconditional. Like a mother to a child. Doesn't matter what the child does, a mother will love it. Or maybe a little less unconditional love into marriage, but nonetheless, that's still something our minds can grasp on in our culture a little bit. Unconditional respect, on the other hand, might surprise some people to hear that that's actually something the Bible commands. 1 Peter, it says to treat everyone with respect. Everyone. That goes against our cultural grain a bit, which says, no, respect must be earned. You don't just respect people, they have to earn it. Or if you give it to them, once they show that they're jerks, you have to take respect away, right? Like, well, I respect that person a little bit less than I did before. That's part of our vernacular. But that's not actually part of a biblical ethic on respect. It's an unconditional expectation, just like love is. Maybe you could subordinate respect as a form of love if you wanted to, but we don't treat people the way that they deserve, do we? Why? Because we were not treated the way that we deserved. God has given us undeserved grace, unmerited favor. He has lavished us with unearned goodness. So are we, the people of God who have received such grace, going to now turn around and treat people without it? Are we who have been given all that we don't deserve now going to treat other people according to what they deserve? No, that's not what we're called to do. We're supposed to treat other people with unconditional grace the way that God treats us that way. This especially happens in marriages. And that's sometimes where it's hardest to do it, as CJ alluded to earlier. Husbands, you're meant to love your wives no matter what. Husbands, you love your wives unconditionally, whether or not she deserves it. And wives should respect your husbands no matter what, unconditionally, even when he doesn't deserve it. That's what Paul's saying. Love your wives unconditionally, husbands. Wives, respect your husbands unconditionally. Now, why would Paul say this? And why would he not tell both spouses to just love each other, right? If love conquers all, if love is all we need, why did he give different instructions to husbands and wives? And how could he boil down the roles of leadership and followership down to the two activities of loving and respecting? Well, that was the question that drove Dr. Emerson Eggerichs to write a book called Love and Respect. It was released in 2004, and this is probably, it's one of my most recommended books that I give to couples, that I recommend for people to read. Eggerichs does a really great job unpacking Ephesians 5:33 and showing how in practicality this is something that we are meant to live out. Now, Eggerichs concludes that the reason God commands husbands and wives to do different things is because husbands and wives actually need different things from their spouse. Men and women are different. We've talked about this, right? We had the brain scans and everything. If you don't believe me that you're different, just try putting together some IKEA furniture together and just see how that goes. If you don't believe you're different, maybe try sitting there in silence while your spouse eats a bowl of cereal and see if you have an opinion on how they eat it, right? Or if you don't think that you're that different, force yourself to stand there in silence while they load the dishwasher the wrong way, right? Men and women are different. We do things differently. Now, one way this presents itself is that men and women, we emotionally run on different fuels. Men primarily need respect. Women primarily need love. Now, I say primarily because, yes, of course, I'll say right at the outset, of course, both genders need both. Men need love too, not just respect, and women need to be respected, not just loved. But there's a lot of data that says that you don't need both equally. It's kind of like water and food for our bodies. Our bodies can go a lot longer without food than they can without water, but yes, eventually we all need both. Water's the primary need, but yes, food is important too. Similarly, men depend on respect more than they do on love, and women need love more than they do respect. Now, some of you may be thinking, wow, this gender-specific stuff sounds really sexist, Scott. It's 2019, yo. Like, why are you still talking this way? Has the feminist movement taught you nothing about these dangerous stereotypes? I mean, Aretha Franklin, she spoke for all women when she loudly declared in the 1960s, that song was sending the message of what? Hey, we women just need some respect, man. That's all we're asking for. When we come home, we just want some respect. Respect is what women needed, and they had to have it. Now, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, it became something of a theme song for many women. It kind of was the theme song of a lot of the feminist movement. But it surprises some people to know that Aretha Franklin didn't actually write this song, nor was Aretha the first one to record it. It was actually both written and recorded by Otis Redding, a man, 2 years earlier in 1965. It was a song that he had written as a plea to his wife. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Now, I'm not at all suggesting that Aretha doesn't have a right to sing this. Of course she can. Of course she can ask for respect, and she has a right to sing this whatsoever. Yes, women need to be respected, absolutely. But the song itself stems from, and I also think illustrates, actually the deeper cry of a man's heart. I once shared this truth about women needing love more than respect and men needing respect more than love with a group of other couples where one wife was convinced it was not true. She's like, that's not true. I need them both. In fact, I probably need a little bit more respect. So her husband, playfully, changed out the word love for respect. So all week long, he didn't tell his wife he loved her. Instead of saying, I love you, baby, he kept saying all week long, I respect you. He kept pointing out all the things about her he respected, but he never told her he loved her. Guess how long that lasted? Not even a week. And she's like, fine, knock it off. Go back to loving me. I am, once again, saying I am speaking very generally. I am speaking broadly. I mean across the board and every other qualifier you would like to hear. I'm putting it out there. In general, women need love. That is the fuel that their hearts and their souls run on. And husbands, if you think back to how your relationship first formed and how it blossomed, how you even got to marriage in the first place, wasn't it with this? Wasn't it with love? Isn't that what caused your woman's heart to flourish and to soften toward you? We pursued our brides. We loved them. We made sure they knew that we loved them. We went over the top about it. Well, it's no wonder then that a woman's heart can grow cold when our love, when our care, our thoughtfulness, our sacrifices, our dragon-slaying passion, our patience, our love for them are no longer warming their hearts. What's going to happen? It's going to go cold. See, a wife knows that she loves her husband. Right? A woman knows, I love my husband. But a woman is constantly wondering, does he love me as much? Does he feel about me the way I feel about him? And she's always looking for clues as to whether or not that's true. A woman is generally, throughout the days, weeks, throughout the months, she is looking for revelations about how you feel toward her. She is measuring and looking and weighing. Does he love me? Is that what I'm feeling and sensing? Now, husbands, this can be exhausting, But you need to know this about your wives, that this is a question most of them are asking pretty much all the time. You can't just say on your wedding day, baby, I love you. I'll let you know if that changes. Right? That's not going to work. You need to remind her of your love frequently and deeply. She needs to be reminded that you love her. See, because God built women, generally, as responders. Women respond to demonstrations of love. They're looking for clues. And not all women are going to respond to the same things in the same ways, right? Women have different personalities and desires as well. Something that may appear loving to one may not to the other. You have to figure out what speaks love to your wife. For example, I learned that getting my wife a tech gadget that's really something I wanted didn't speak love to her. Shocker. I didn't know that. But, I found that out when I got her a device that she was not overly excited about. I was like, oh, but I was. What device was it, you ask? I was nothing. It was a scale. It did like your body mass index and all kinds of other cool stuff. I thought it'd be neat. Don't ever put a woman's name on a scale, ever. It's kind of a mistake you make once when you're really young and dumb. I made that mistake once. Husbands, you need to unconditionally love your wives. That is God's command. Doesn't matter whether she deserves it or not. A woman's tank needs love. Emotional connection is what is most important to her. It's absolutely crucial. That's what she has to have. Now, on the other hand, again, speaking generally across the board, using every other qualifier imaginable, in general, men need respect. This is love to them. It's respect. That is a man's deepest value. God built men, generally speaking, more as initiators. God designed men to take challenges head on, to protect, to nurture, to create. They want to fix things. They want to solve things. They want to be the knight in shining armor. Men are motivated by affirmation, by appreciation, and by respect. So it makes sense that God, through Paul, instructs the wife here to make sure she shows respect to her husband. Why do husbands like fixing other people's stuff more than they fix their own? Have you ever wondered that? It's because when they do it at home, the best they can hope for is that, well, it's about time. But when they do it for somebody else, oh, it's valued, it's appreciated. They're cared for, it's expressed in gratitude. Right? The kind of tone and attitude things is what men will pick up on when it comes to respect. Now, what does respect even mean? Many of us maybe have a better understanding of what love looks and feels like, but what does it mean to respect somebody? Well, the word respect itself means to have reverence for, to be in awe of, to value, to honor. We're called to honor everyone. We are called to even honor God. Right? This respect of reverence and awe, of valuing and honoring, is part of our response to God. Men long to be appreciated, to be noticed. They want to be looked up to. They want to be cared about. Have you ever wondered why some men will leave their beautiful wives for another woman who's way less attractive? It doesn't have that much to do with sex, honestly. It has a lot to do with respect. He's sometimes found someone who has told him how wonderful and special he was. Now, does that excuse in any way infidelity? Of course not. But it might explain it sometimes. Men need respect more than they need emotional love. In a nationwide survey, 400 men were given a choice between going through two different negative experiences. Right? So they were told, if you had to choose between these two scenarios, which would you prefer? Would you rather feel alone and unloved, or would you rather feel inadequate and disrespected? Right? For the rest of your life, would you rather be alone and unloved, Or would you rather always feel disrespected and inadequate? 3 out of 4 men said, I would rather be alone and unloved than to feel inadequate and disrespected. Now, again, it's not that men are indifferent to love. Yes, we want to be loved. Yes, men need emotional connection too. But if we have to pick, most of us will take respect over love. God knows this. This is how he has designed men to be. So wives, know this about your men. Know that in this world, he has to carve out respect for himself everywhere else. His workplace, his environment, his community, everywhere else says, I will respect you once you earn it. You have to deserve it. Work hard, be better, do more. Wives, I encourage you, give your husband one place where he doesn't have to earn it. Give him one place of sanctuary where he can be respected for who he is, not just what he does. Don't withhold your respect until you think he deserves it. That's not grace. It's not what God does for you, and it's not what he commands you to do. It says, wives, respect your husbands. Wives, do you know that most of your husbands are very convinced of your love for them? They know you love them, but they don't think you like them. Studies show that if you ask a man, does your wife love you? He says, yes, of course. Does she like you? They laugh and go, no. Because she would change everything about me. Right? That's the message so many men hear all the time. This is especially true in conflict. Another study asked men, in conflict, what do you feel? Do you feel like your wife's not loving you, or do you feel like she's not respecting you? 82% said, during conflict, I am not being respected. Your husband knows that you love him. That's not the problem. The problem in conflict is that he's not feeling respected. That's pretty sad if you really look at a lot of the surveys about how men feel about how their wives feel about them. A lot of men feel very put down, very criticized. They feel like they're nothing. And so sometimes they go looking for it in other places and in other ways, most of it destructive and harmful. Maybe through work, maybe through lust, maybe through affairs, maybe through getting their appreciation and value somewhere else. And of course, some of that is a man's own sin, absolutely. But some of it is that his soul is looking for something that he hopes he'll get at home. But if he doesn't, he struggles. Nagging chips away at a man's self-worth because a man needs respect. That's the tank that his heart and soul generally run on. Being treated with dignity and respect are what's crucial to him. He longs for you to think of him highly and then to treat him accordingly. So the commands are for husbands to love your wives no matter what, unconditionally you love your wife. And wives, no matter what, unconditionally respect your husbands. Now, what happens when you don't do this? All right, what happens if we withhold love and respect for one another? Well, Dr. Eggerichs calls that resulting situation the crazy cycle. Now, you might not know the crazy cycle by name, but you almost certainly know it by experience. If you've been married for longer than 2 months, or you've ever tried to share a tub of toothpaste, you know what the crazy cycle is. This is an actual picture I took this week of our toothpastes. One of us is normal, and the other one is a monster, squeezing toothpaste in the center. We cannot share toothpaste. When husbands and wives don't get what they need, they react by withholding what their partner needs. He reacts without love. She reacts without respect. He reacts without love. She reacts without respect. He reacts without love. She reacts without respect. And we go spinning downward on the crazy cycle. Think of it this way. Emotionally speaking, your partner, each of you have an air hose that is connecting to your heart, to your soul, that's giving you what you need. Just like your body needs to breathe in oxygen, Men need to breathe in respect, and women need to breathe in love. Now, what happens when you're taking water or sucking oxygen and somebody comes and crinkles the hose, or you have a mean older brother who holds you under the water and you're not getting the oxygen you need, right? Any other younger siblings here? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I almost got drowned a couple of times. What happens when someone's depriving you of your oxygen? You freak out, right? You go like, "Hi! Hi!" You grab a baseball bat, you start whacking on somebody, be like, "This is my air hose. Do not take my oxygen from me. I need that to live." So what happens when a husband or wife feels like their oxygen tanks to their hearts are getting crinked? When intentionally or unintentionally, somebody is stepping on the air hose that supplies love and respect to their hearts. Pretty much the same thing. You freak out, you start grabbing emotional baseball bats, and you start whacking on each other. Get off my hose. And it can happen so innocently at times. Dumb things like toothpaste can sometimes start the crazy cycle, can it? The dumbest fights sometimes. Like the typically forgetful husband who finally remembers his 10th anniversary coming up. So he goes to the store, goes to the greeting card aisle, peruses the greeting card, reads one, goes, "This one's perfect." Picks that one out, gets a present, and comes home. And his wife is so thrilled. He's finally remembered their anniversary. She is beaming from ear to ear. She feels loved. She feels valued. Until she opens it up. And they both discover that he has bought her a birthday card instead of an anniversary card. Suddenly, her whole demeanor changes. She now feels overlooked. She now feels not cared about. He can't even read a card properly. The anger boils up in her, and even though it was an honest mistake, she starts to criticize him. "You can't even get a card right. I wish you didn't got me a card at all." "Well, I'm glad I got you that card, because clearly you deserve it, crazy woman." And then you start flaring with tempers and anger, and suddenly you're now spending your anniversary room behind slammed doors at opposite ends of the house. The crazy cycle. When a woman's deepest need is stepped on, you can expect her to react negatively. When a husband's deepest need is stepped on, you can expect he's going to react negatively. Thus, the crazy cycle revs up and goes round and around. See, when a wife is being critical, when she's being angry, she's actually, husbands, crying out for your love and your attention. She is not meaning to be disrespectful, even if it feels that way. And wives, when your husband gets angry and critical, or more commonly, withdraws and stonewalls, he's not meaning to come across as unloving. That's him actually crying out for respect, to be treated a different way. He's not meaning to be unloving, even if it feels that way to you. Crazy cycle. So when it spins up, how can you get off of it? How can you stop so many of the conflicts that arise from us stepping accidentally on one another's needs? Well, what causes the crazy cycle to spin in the first place is when you are focused on your needs alone, right? You're focusing on my needs. I'm not getting what I want. Therefore, where's my baseball bat? So the first thing you need to do is actually stop and consider your spouse's need. Consider their need. Ask yourself, is my husband reacting without love because he's feeling disrespected? Husbands, ask yourself, is my wife here reacting disrespectfully because she's feeling unloved? And if that's a possibility in this conflict, then step 2 is to ask them that. Ask, don't tell, right? For wives, don't say, "You're such an unloving jerk." It's not going to go over well. Instead, ask and say, hey, that felt unloving. Did I come across as disrespectful? And if the answer is yes, then say, I am sorry for being disrespectful. Will you forgive me? How can I come across more respectfully next time? Husbands, don't say, you disrespectful dragon. Rather ask, hey, that felt disrespectful. Was I unloving? If the answer is yes, then you say, I am sorry for being unloving. Will you forgive me? How can I come across more lovingly next time? Don't accuse, ask. Invite a response, and then be humble, be gracious, be forgiving. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. If you don't do this, then he's going to react without love, and she's going to react without respect, and he's going to react without love, and she's going to react without respect, and you are going to find yourself on the never-ending crazy cycle, ultimately depriving your spouse and yourself of the deep needs you actually have. But this isn't all bad news. In fact, there's some really good news here if we put Ephesians 5:33 into practice. Did you know that this cycle that works negatively can work positively too? Did you know that when a husband responds with love, it motivates a wife to respond with respect, which motivates his love, which motivates her respect, which motivates his love, which motivates her respect. And you can actually take a ride on what Eggerichs calls the energizing cycle. Energizing. Doesn't that sound so much better than crazy? His love motivates her respect. Her respect will in turn motivate his love. This love and respect thing, this can work positively or negatively. You can either use it or not. Either way, it's going to vastly affect your marriage. But when one person goes out of their way to give their spouse what they need, often, frequently, most of the time, some qualifiers there, but generally, it's going to motivate the spouse to give you what you need. It unlocks and motivates the respect and the love that is actually there, the goodwill your spouse really does have toward you. This past week, I came home from work on one of the days a little bit early because Fiona had to head off to a late afternoon appointment. So I sacrificed some of my schedule, some of my time, some of my routine to come home, take care of the kids, and do the dinner routine and all that. And when I got home, I noticed that Fiona had kind of gone the extra mile to prepare dinner already in advance for us, and to get the house clean, which when you have 4 girls that are 8 and under, it's pretty hard to do. But I noticed she had put a lot of time and effort into just helping me not come home into chaos. Hey, here's the plan, house looks good, here's your food, you'll be just fine. And I kind of noticed that. We had a quick kiss exchange. She had to go off to her meeting. I took over and noticed it. And so I just sent her a text. Just sent her a text, say, hey, I appreciate all that you did to get the house and dinner ready for me and the kids. I love you. And I just sent a text expressing value. I noticed what you did. I really appreciate it. You are awesome, and I love you. And I got a text back. I'm sure she was at a red light. I got a text back saying, you're welcome. I love you. Thank you for working so hard for our family and providing for us. So which in turn made me feel good and respected. So we each gave each other what the other person needed. And guess what we each got? What we needed. The energizing cycle. We have bought into this love and respect model. We do not always do it perfectly. It has not always been this way. It takes a lot of time and effort to practice this. This doesn't come naturally to most of us. And often we'll even start up spinning on the crazy cycle a couple of rounds before we go, wait a minute, what's going on here? Is one of us missing something, or then both of us? But if husbands will love their wives, and if wives will respect your husbands, good things are going to happen. I really believe that. This is a simple principle that is right there in Ephesians 5:33. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. It's simple, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of learning, right? Because men and women, not only are we different, not only do we have different needs, but we talk in code. Right? Like we don't even speak the language that the other person even speaks. We ask for what we need in unusual ways, like with anger and criticism and stonewalling. That's not really helpful, but that's nonetheless how we tend to ask for what we need. So you are going to have to practice decoding what your spouse is actually asking for. Get to know them. Figure out what are they really needing deep down. What is beneath their words and their actions? Husbands need respect. Wives need love, right? Wives are looking for closeness. They're looking for connection. They're looking for openness, for understanding. They want to be at peace with you. They want loyalty and esteem and closeness with you. They want to connect with you over all kinds of things. And actually connecting with you, even if it's talking about the day or their problems, is actually more important to them, just connecting with you, than you actually solving their problems. Right? The connection is what's more important, which is why a woman will often say, don't try to fix it. I just need you to listen. Right? Anybody else ever had that conversation? We have that one a lot. Perhaps you can relate to this couple in this video.
There's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can...
It's not about the nail. Men and women, we generally have different purposes for talking. Men and women don't talk for the same reason. Women talk to connect. Men talk to accomplish a task, right? Maybe the task is to connect with you. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's to get this thing done. And outside of that, we're done talking. Wives, though, they need to connect. That's where they're going to feel love. Wives need love. Husbands, that means they need you to prioritize them. They need you to connect with them emotionally. I promise you, good things will happen, right? Notice, all he said was, that must be really hard for you. And he got his hand on hers, came in for a kiss, and who knows what else might have happened, right? Good things can happen when you give your wife the love that she needs. On the flip side, wives, husbands need respect. Your husband wants you to appreciate who he is. Yes, he's different from you. One of the ways he expresses his love for you is by working hard. Where you see him once again skipping out on dinner or being late or not doing this, in his mind, he's working hard because he loves you. It's the same value, but you're the same action, but you're interpreting it from two different directions with different values. You need to understand your husband desires to just achieve. He wants to accomplish things. He wants to complete tasks. He wants to fix things. He wants to solve problems. I encourage you, value his ability to analyze and to counsel. He really can help fix some of the nails in your life if you will listen to him. But we need to accept that we are different. We are like opposites, made in the image of God. And so rather than complaining about how your spouse just doesn't get it because they won't read your code, maybe make sure you're decoding their needs. Are you getting them correctly? And again, realize there's a lot of grace here, and there has to be, because this love and respect thing does not come naturally to us. Right? Being unconditionally loving is not a man's natural language. And being unconditionally respectful is not a wife's native tongue. God understands that. He made us the way He made us. He knows the effects that sin has on our beings and on our relationships, which is why making a marriage work requires work. You're going to have to work at this. This is not always going to be easy. It takes time to develop this as a habit of loving your wife well, of respecting your husband well, of taking the humble route and say, have I stepped on your hose? Are you feeling disrespected? But I'm racking my brain. I can't come up with anything. I don't think that there is a principle I know of that has greater potential to revolutionize a marriage than this. For both spouses to put God's word into practice. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. If you each give to the other person what their heart and soul are longing for, good things are going to happen. And there is a lot of research to back this up. For example, Dr. John Gottman, who's a psychology professor at the University of Washington. So he's a secular professor at a secular university. He led a research team for 20 years studying couples across the United States, controlling for all various background factors and values. The end of their study, there was one striking commonality for healthy couples. He says it was this: healthy couples have a strong undercurrent of two basic ingredients: love and respect. It's almost like God knew what He was writing 2,000 years ago in Ephesians 5:33 when He told husbands and wives to treat each other with love and respect. Dr. Gottman says that these are the direct opposite of an antidote for contempt, which is perhaps the most corrosive force in marriage. See, in times of conflict, in times when we are hurt, in times when our hose is being stepped on, we forget all the good and kind things that our spouse has done, don't we? Right, in the middle of a conflict, they quickly become the enemy. The enemy is no longer the problem. The enemy is now the person. We forget who they are, what they've done, and when we start just kind of to assume the worst about them. We assume the worst about their motives, right? We start thinking things like they're so controlling and mean. They always do this. They never listen. They did that on purpose. They do this every time. I implore you, remember that your spouse, deep, deep down, even when they mess up, even when they wrong you, deep down, their deepest heart toward you is actually one of kindness. Their deepest intentions toward you are full of goodwill. Assume the best about each other. Communicate openly, communicate honestly about what your needs are and what you think your spouse's needs are. And this is important. Be careful not to put heavy expectations on each other. Do not expect each of you to be able to do this perfectly. You won't be able to. Fiona shared a quote with me this week that she heard on a podcast where the person talking said, "Every expectation is a resentment waiting to happen." Every expectation is a resentment waiting to happen. Be very selective and careful with the expectations you bring into your marriage. Are some legitimate? Absolutely. Like to have the expectation of faithfulness. That is, of course, reasonable. To have expectations about who's going to do what in the home on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, those are reasonable. Just talk about them. Do not burden your spouse with too many expectations. All of your disappointments, every single one of them, results from some unmet expectation that you had. Now, again, maybe it was a legitimate expectation that was not met, but maybe it wasn't. All of your disappointments come from unmet expectations, so be selective. Minimize the expectations you put on your spouse, and do not expect this love and respect thing to be happening perfectly and flowing all the time. You're a sinner, and so is your spouse, which is why we need Christ in the first place. He's the one that can empower us and enable us to do this well. So don't focus on what the other person's doing. That's not your job. God's not going to hold you responsible for what they're doing. He is going to hold you responsible for your own choices, your own thoughts, your own words, your own actions. So husbands, don't focus on whether or not she's respecting you the way you think she should. Wives, don't focus on whether or not he is loving you the way you think he ought to. Instead, focus on God's instruction to you. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. Both of you, no matter what. Good things will happen. You can only control yourself. But if you want a better marriage, I encourage you to try this. Do this. Love and respect is the how of how God wants husbands and wives to relate to one another. And maybe that sounds like a little bit skeptical. Be like, I don't know, Scott, boiling marriage down to one key seems a bit like an oversell. Perhaps. Maybe it sounds like that. I'm overselling the benefits of doing this, but I really don't think I am. My dad is a pastor. He's been married to my mom for 46 years, and I sent him this message as like, hey, am I in the ballpark? And he wrote back and said, Ephesians 5:33 is spot on. In 46 years of marriage, he thinks it boils down to this. Husbands, love your wives. Unconditionally, as Christ has loved the church, that's your job. Wives, respect your husbands. Love and respect is the key. Love and respect will help you build a safe and secure marriage where both spouses can flourish. And the reason that's true is because people thrive in safe and secure environments. That's how God has made us. That's what God gave us all the way back in the garden. We messed it up. But he's been all about taking us to a new kingdom where there is safety and security for his people. That's what Jesus gives us. Jesus provides a safe and secure kingdom for his people. A safe and secure kingdom where his people receive love and respect. Where his church, his bride, his people, you and me are treated with love and respect. Exactly what we need in the kingdom of God. Jesus is our example of what love and respect looks like, and he's given us communion as a reminder, as an opportunity to think about and reflect on his sacrifice for us. So think about it real quick with me in terms of love and respect. I mean, we celebrate the Lord's Supper, which we do on the first Sunday of every month. We have a chance to remember how Jesus went to the cross, how he died for our sins, the ultimate demonstration of his love for us. But it also shows how much he values us, how much he honors us, how much he deems us worthy of his affections. That's also respect that he shows toward us. So during communion, I invite you to consider this morning how the life and death of Jesus might serve as an example of love and respect to you. Ask God to show you how you can demonstrate great love toward your wife and how you can demonstrate great respect toward your husband, giving each of yourselves, giving one another exactly what you need. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands.